What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to The Standard. I got Jake on for a second podcast, The Wizard. Super excited for today's podcast. Jake, how we doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Excited to be here for a second time. So
Yes, sir, man. I brought you on because I want to get into some of the technical side of things. I want to give our audience, our athletes, some of our coaches some real strategies, some practical application that they can use for their program. So juice to have you, man.
I'm excited.
Yeah, so today we're going to go through some strategies for team sports to help increase their performance, some obstacles and some stuff that you and I have learned along the way and the things that have worked for us with our teams, and then some lessons you've learned on how to build trust with the thousands of athletes you've worked with, and some other things you've worked with the thousands and thousands of hours you've put in these last 4.5, 5 years. We're going to talk about speed and some practical application of speed. I think that's the cure-all for most of the sports and athletes that we work with. And then we'll finish with some of our ACL project and dive deep in on that.
For sure. Let's dive into it.
You're always nerding out on something. What's your topic right now? What's your, you go through phases. What are you diving deep into right now?
Yeah, my main one that I'm looking into right now, I'm really interested in terms of more of the functional or applied side of anatomy. I think my traditional kind of background in education has been more so looking at things in kind of individualized spaces, whereas there's not a lot of connection in how things interrelate to one another. So right now I'm reading a book called Rolfing, The Integration of Human Structures, and it's kind of something that takes into account different fascial structures and the way that the human body kind of integrates with one another. And it's been really interesting so far. It's definitely a weakness for me, but I'm learning a lot going through that process. And then there's a couple training books that I'm looking at as well. But the Rolfing book is kind of my main focus right now. I just am really interested when I open it up, and yeah, it's just awesome. I really enjoy it.
And this book is more on the MET stuff, right?
Not so much in the MET stuff. It's more. There's not really any therapy techniques in it. Technically, Rolfing is a therapy or manual therapy technique that you can look at. This book doesn't include any of the actual Rolfing techniques. It's more of an applied or functional anatomy type book in terms of how the body actually works and I guess works together in different aberrations that we commonly see in the human body as a result of lifestyle choices or training or whatever it may be.
I love it. Why are you going into this? Like, what did you start seeing in a few of your athletes that you're like, man, I have to get better on the table, or I have to increase your knowledge to be able to, help some of these movement strategies? What did you see? I know you're very cautious about what you're going to do on the table. Like, you're not just going to do something just to do something. It always has a purpose. So what made you realize you need to start getting better at this?
Well, one of my passions and one of the things that I love the most about the training side of things is trying to, I guess, understand movement. I love watching it. I love kind of diving deeper into it and trying to understand why an athlete moves a certain way or why somebody might bias towards one technique versus another. And honestly, I still am sometimes I guess confused is the best way to say. I'm confused about why certain athletes choose what they do, and out of that kind of confusion is kind of where a lot of that interest is, I guess, bred. Every athlete that we have or we come across presents its own unique puzzle and challenge, and so therefore our knowledge has to continue to increase and kind of work around. I mean, obviously there's your traditional or sometimes some basic ones that we really see like common in the athletes that we presently see today. But at the same time, there's a lot of unique challenges as well that are presented to us that force us to kind of expand our knowledge around a certain subject or topic. And it's kind of an ongoing thing, and that's probably the thing that I enjoy the most about it is that there's always a new challenge to kind of seek out, or there's a new puzzle to solve, and the process never ends, and this Rolfing or MET book or whatever it may be is hopefully you find a few answers. Most of the time when you read one of those textbooks, you maybe find 2 or 3 in an entire book, which is, you don't really question it, but it's just kind of the process of going through it. And oftentimes, I mean, like the MET book, I mean, I read that one, and it's interesting, like the connections that you start to make between them. And sometimes that's just the process of how we learn and how we have to go through it, especially when my education didn't involve that side of things. It's been a little bit more of a self-taught process and different mentors that have helped with that.
I love it. I think, especially from the experience I've had on the table, which is same with you, like I feel like I'm not near where I need to be or not near even close to being an expert on that, and always learning and usually trying to, defer to someone else and learn from them, because that isn't my area of expertise. The results we can get from that are crazy, but sometimes it's crazy because I don't really know where they're coming from.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is sure. Which is tough because I don't ever want to do anything I can't explain. But when you can see those issues and those patterns, but you don't always know how to fix them, you know what I mean? It's that's what makes it fun. That's why it's crazy every day. So you train 2 college programs, tons of high school teams, large groups with these teams. You also obviously work with a bunch of individuals and semi-privates. But in our world, the team sport world, it's super hard to get the results that we want on a huge widespread, right? And I think the guys that are the best in the world at it, their skill set is that, right? What obstacles and things have you seen and dealt with teams? Maybe dealing with the team sport coaches. I know we have some awesome coaches we work with, but still dealing with that relationship, dealing with what they're doing at practice. What have you seen, and then what things have you done that you feel like have had a positive impact on performance?
Yeah, the first obstacle I think we all face, and all of the coaches at Off the Field, or any coach in general faces, just getting buy-in. And I think ultimately there's a lot of different strategies of how to go about that and different books and things to look at. But I think it comes down to, or at least the first stop has to be, truly loving your athletes and loving the teams that you work with. And honestly, that's something that I learned from you. I mean, when I first came into Off the Field, I didn't really know what I wanted. At that point, I was super interested in the technical side of things and the programming side of things. But I didn't necessarily understand the relationships. And if you look at probably the last 4.5 years, I think what I'm most proud of in the last 4.5 years is 100% the relationships with athletes. I mean, that's what I look back on and the most fond of and the most proud of is what's kind of grown and built out of the people that I work with. And I think that has to be the first stop. Athletes can tell and they can feel it, and they know when you truly do care. And I think that has to be the first stop when you come to overcoming some of those obstacles and getting some buy-in and creating a culture or a good training environment within a team, semi-private or an individual setting. I think the second one and the second lesson that I learned is, and we've talked about this one too, is the more complex the environment gets, I think the more simple we have to be.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, like when we have Rocky football this morning, obviously you can tell my voice is a little bit shot, but we have 70 guys in the weight room or 50 guys, whatever it may be, and sometimes in the gym we pack the house a little bit, and it's really fun energy, but at the same time, I think sometimes it's easy to get a little bit too complex with what we're doing to where an athlete doesn't understand what the main objective is, and they also have too many things to kind of think about, whether it's from a technical standpoint or just worrying about different exercises, different spacing, whatever it may be. So I think from our standpoint, we have to be a little bit more simple to match that complex environment and some of the chaos that's going around us.
Yeah, give me an example of your college soccer program. So unique situation. You don't get to be there all the time. Smaller school, NAIA school, had some great success this year. Coach is awesome. Girls are awesome. What things did you simplify? Because it was same thing. You had to create buy-in. You had to build a program a little bit around what their coach wanted as well. Every single thing that you put into that program, I know it was for a desired output. You know what I mean? How did you simplify that? And give me some, if you could, some more specific things on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Working with CFI Soccer has been kind of an interesting journey because you can see the growth of the relationship from year to year. When I first started, we worked with them for a spring. They all go home for the summer. I didn't see them at all in the fall. The second year, we had them again for the spring. I saw them a little bit more in the summer as we started to have some athletes get a little bit more trust in terms of what we were trying to do and what we were trying to create. So we saw a few more people come in the summer. And then we had a little bit more time going into the fall, and we started to implement some different fitness testing ideas and concepts that we wanted to start to look at. And my third year, again, was probably the first year that we had them for the entire time, to where we had them all the way winter, spring. They go home, but we still were programming for them in the summer, and then we had them all the way through the fall, and it was kind of the same deal last year. And that hasn't really been the case, and it's been kind of a cool growth through that process, I guess. As far as kind of how I've simplified my programming, I think it has to start with a pretty clear objective of what you're trying to get out of it. Now, that doesn't mean that you aren't training other qualities. You always have kind of an interplay of the different qualities that you're training. However, usually one is probably a little bit more prominent within a program. And so clearly labeling and identifying the objectives that you're working towards, and then saying, okay, well, what other noise can I reduce around that? What's actually necessary for me to actually improve that quality? And then are the other things that are going on in the program, are those taking away, or are they actually enhancing what we're going after and what we're chasing with that main objective that we're looking for? I don't know if that's enough detail or enough of what you were looking for, or if you want more specifics of that.
I love it.
I think that's kind of the first stop in terms of how I see it, I guess.
Those are the two. It's hard to pinpoint to me, but the two biggest things, I mean, for even when I'm looking for coaches to hire, even when I'm trying to figure out what, is our uniqueness, it's number one, caring about the athletes and loving them. And we have read a lot of things, we've listened to a lot of things, and like actually teaching that, I don't know. I think you kind of have to love it. You know what I mean? And if they have buy-in, even like I've said a million times, what I was doing 10 years ago was so terrible compared to what I'm doing now. I would have fired myself. But I think it was you guys and the guys that you knew I was giving you everything I got, and I was going to keep trying to get better. You know, I had a conversation with a couple of our NFL guys to where it was like, appreciate them trusting me when I know they were working with the best guys in the world, and they knew I wasn't on that level yet, but I was doing everything I could to try to get to that level. You know what I mean? I'm not even sure I'm there yet either. You know what I mean? But it's a constant growth thing, and I think that if they know that we're continuing to work, they're going to give us everything they got.
Well, at the same time, too, I think you can write the most technical program in the world, but if you don't have that trust and they can't feel that love, it just doesn't matter. I mean, you don't get the same output and the same effort every day and the same intention. I mean, training is consistent and it's monotonous, and in order for that to work, there has to be a relationship and there has to be a mutual kind of respect, understanding, trust, and I guess it's kind of corny or whatever, but love for each other in terms of how you go about that.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the more experience we get, a little more validity we get, at least in the state of Idaho, right? But at the beginning, too, it's tough to be super simple and show them, like, we're just doing these two movements, and these are going to make you better. And they're like, oh, I know how to squat. Or I squat all the time, or I squat heavy, right? And that's a tough battle. It's kind of fun, though, to where, you know, kind of take pride and be like, hey, we're going to do these two things for this amount of time, for a long period of time, for this block, and we're going to be the best at these. And for them to buy into that and realize that that's actually going to, you know, have a transfer onto the field or into the sport, or actually, you know, get the output that we want, whether it's strength or power or speed or whatever it is we're looking for. You know what I mean? I think that's the balance between them buying in and then the balance between simplifying things is tricky, because you know, they see the Instagram stuff. There's kids straight out of high school or college, or guys that are playing right now that are doing the you know, the things that look really cool, jumping on extremely high boxes or doing a speed ladder or doing something like that, and it looks sweet for Instagram. But for us to come in and say, hey, we're going to squat with 10 pounds for this whole first week, and you got a guy who can squat 500 pounds, he's like, what the hell am I doing, right? Yeah,
for sure.
But I love it.
Yeah, and going back to your point too, I think validity helps to get people in the door, and it helps on day one. And maybe if you're cool a week, and maybe if you're really cool a month, but it runs its course at some point. And
100%.
Yeah, it runs its course at some point, and that's where that relationship has to come into play.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the old cliche. Most of us that are strength coaches and performance coaches weren't the LeBron Jameses of the world or the Michael Jordans. You know what I mean? We were the ones that wanted to be there, but we just weren't that athletic. You know what I mean? And so to get a guy to buy into us, you know what I mean? It's not always about who had the best career. It's about the ones that care. It's about the ones that they know we're going to give them everything that we got. You know what I mean? And you hear that all the time, but it's the more and more I do it, the more and more I realize that, you know, which is sweet. You know what I mean? And this kind of goes along with that, like you were just talking about. But what are some of the biggest things that you've learned with, I mean, in the last 4.5 years, I don't think people realize, I mean, how many athletes we see and how hard we've worked. I mean, there's days where you're training 12 hours in a day. You know what I mean? For 4.5 years, and you're getting after it. You know what I mean? So you've seen so many people, and it's never just on the fly with you either. Everything I know is prepared and planned and organized and thought through, and you debrief and you with yourself and try to figure those things out. You know, through those lessons, or what lessons have you figured out? You know, with seeing that many athletes in that short amount of time.
Well, one, I think, I guess I'll go two different directions with this one. The first one would be, it's given a really unique and awesome opportunity to watch and just sit back and observe. And that's something that's taken a long time to kind of think about and understand and try and figure out, I guess, how to do. But when you see so many athletes over time and you're on the floor so much, it's challenging, right? Because you want to always be so involved and you always want to be here, and here and bouncing around. But sometimes if you take a breath and sit back and just watch how athletes move, how they interact, how they do different things, I think you start to learn a lot. And one of my projects over the last probably 2 or 2.5 years, I mean, obviously, we talked about it before. I love reading and I love doing courses and I love doing A, B, and C. But if we treat it the right way, I mean, what if we could just learn from the athletes that we worked with? Yeah. And I think it was hard for me to learn how to do that. I still don't know completely how to do that, but at the same time, it's something that I'm trying to work towards is, okay, well, how can I take a step back and how can I figure out why my own athlete, not somebody else's athlete that I learned in whatever course or whatever reading it may be, why is he doing that way? Whether it's something that's cognitive, maybe it's a misunderstanding of what he should be doing from, maybe it's an acceleration standpoint, maybe he doesn't understand the rules of acceleration or how he should be moving. Or it's a squat or it's a clean or whatever it may be, or it's some type of mechanical issue where it's his body doesn't allow him to get to a certain position. I think the second one that I would probably, the second avenue that I guess I'll go down with that question is the athlete intake process is really challenging, and it's hard, especially in the private setting, right? Because you kind of already hit on it. When we get an athlete on day one, yeah, we do an eval and we do an awesome process with that, and hopefully we learn a little bit from the eval, but at the end of the day, there's ways to make it more thorough, and we learn way more through actually training and watching them train and watching them move and learning about personalities and again, why they do what they do. And sometimes I think, especially when I first started, maybe it would take me 6-7 months to maybe figure out the avenue that I want to take with that athlete for how I'm going to go about training him and the objectives that I'm looking for. And I think over time, hopefully, I maybe get there a little bit sooner. Again, it still takes time to truly kind of weed out and maybe rule out different things. Maybe it's going back and forth at the table, or maybe it's giving him a different cueing strategy or looking at things a different way. But hopefully I can get to what the athlete needs a little bit faster, and I think that's the goal. I mean, we have to maximize the time that we have people. If I have somebody for 4 or 5 months in a preseason, or sometimes even 2-3 months in a preseason, I have to get to what he needs as fast as humanly possible. That's hard to do. It's easy to say that you did it. If we take a realistic look at what we're doing, it's hard to say that. It's really hard to say that. And I don't know if we'll ever know, but hopefully we can create different clues and different ideas about what they should be doing a little bit faster.
I mean, I told you, I think one of the biggest things I wish that I don't know if it's a regret, but when I first started, it was 100% about winning. As many people as I can and get everybody to win. Some of them did that, some of them didn't. Maybe it was just the energy and the passion over what actually I was giving them. It also was the thing of being in the right place at the right time with some great teams and some great coaches. But I think there was so many years where it was I wasn't watching for the right things. You know what I mean? And I think I was so young. I think it helped me learn a lot. But I think if I would have been looking at the right things, I think it would be a lot farther than where I am now. And I think you and Dan Paff really helped me change and realize that. I mean, every day is a movement screen. Every single day is a day that is something where we're trying to figure out exactly what we're trying to get. You know what I mean? Which is hard to talk to a high school football coach or a college football coach. You know what I mean? Hey, we're going to clean and we're going to do this. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, maybe Jake shouldn't do that. Maybe Cherries should be doing that, but somebody else shouldn't be. And being able to illustrate that and talk about that has been tough. And because, like you said too, we're still trying to learn the movements and do things like that. And I think the growth has been awesome, and I think the kids see it. But that was one of my biggest, I guess, regret, that I wasn't watching that back in the day. Who in the last few years were some of your, like 3 to 5, give me, or however many, some of your biggest performance mentors, maybe that you've had and you've learned from, and maybe a couple takeaways you've had from them?
Number one would be Dan Paff. I got pretty fortunate in terms of that opportunity. I mean, you helped me get that one where I got to do the mentorship with Altus, and sitting in a room with those guys in and of itself is, regardless of the technical side, is unbelievable. That's the pinnacle of it. I mean, is to be able to talk to him and listen to him lecture and listen to him talk about different training ideas. And I think what I learned from him, and the biggest takeaways that I had, goes back to what you just talked about. It's just paying attention. It's watching, it's understanding, it's trying to identify, it's having a curiosity around the training process. I can go back to a lot of technical things, but everything revolves around that.
Yep.
Matt Jordan would be my second one. I took his courses, and I had a really unique opportunity to actually be able to work with him on an athlete, and the way that he thinks about training is on another level in terms of how to create a systematic approach to the training process that hopefully, we just talked about paying attention, hopefully allows you to understand what you're paying attention to maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, he's on another level. It's insane. And his, I think, is his passion for it. It's ever-changing for him, too. He knows, he's trying to figure out the best possible way every single day and doesn't settle for anything less. His standards are crazy, which has been awesome to see and hear from him.
And honestly, it's weird because we're in the same podcast, but my third one would be you. I mean, this is where I learned how to coach. Offthefield is 100% where I learned how to coach and how to communicate with athletes and work with people and understand it and just be on the floor and have a presence.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, those would be my 3.
Thank you. It's been crazy to see and watch with you. You know what I mean? It's we, even with you and I, the more that I hear you talk, the more that I try to reflect and trying to figure out how I can get better, trying to grow a business. So I know I'm having more limited time on the coaching side of things, which is kind of fun, kind of stressful because I love the coaching side of things. But the trust to me is what equals results always, right? And that's with me coaching you guys, my employees, my coaches and stuff like that, to where I want you guys to be better at coaching than me and smarter than me and know how to go down. I mean, because that's your guys' passion, so I want you guys to go get it, you know what I mean? Developing that trust and then doing that with our kids too, It's hard for me to pinpoint. I've talked to you about before, like it's crazy to me how Stu or Dan or some of those guys that we listen to put their words, what's in their head on paper. Have you, I know that you're huge on writing and the debrief. Have you put that down? Have you thought about that on, kind of like your strategies on how to build trust? And I know it's the loving thing, but I mean, is there a way to pinpoint that? I mean, it's insane to me the amount of trust that you have. You have a family of 8-year-olds to high schoolers, that you work with, a group of 4. And then you have professional athletes, and you give the same amount of attention and presence and trust to that 8-year-old that you do to to the 30-year-old. I don't know. I mean, do you have any strategies for that? To me, it's something, again, I wish I would have recognized sooner.
I don't know. I really don't know. But I think you know it when you see it, and you know it when you feel it.
Whatever you do moving forward, don't lose that.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's so easy to get on the technical side of things. It's so easy to get to learn this new about the shoulder, or this about the knee, or hey, this is the cure-all for how to get faster. That's it. I think that's huge. I think that's the gift that you have, and I think that you've helped me realize that what we have and the coaches we have around. So, speaking of the cure-all, let's get into some of the technical side of things. Speed. It's probably the biggest thing that we work on as far as technical and tactical type of thing and off the field. You know what I mean? These aren't your favorite questions, yeah? Because I know that you like to. There's so many nuances. There's so many different ways. Like you've said before, if you watch somebody on a social media post and you watch them run, you can judge that video, but you don't know what led up to it, what's coming after it. Like, you don't know everything in between, right? What are the main things that you're looking at to help increase an athlete to get faster? You know what I mean? What are the main things that you are like, okay, I need to focus on these? And if you had a hierarchy of things on how you would break down that framework.
Yeah, tough question.
Not one you like.
No, tough question. But it's one that everyone asks. It's one that everyone asks, and people are interested in. And I think the first stop for me with acceleration is acceleration, top speed, change direction, whatever it may be. They have to understand the rules of each of those, and that has to be stop number one. I think sometimes, and it's a debated issue, I know a lot of people who have gotten a lot of success going the other way, where they train outputs before they train some type of technical mastery. But I think our first stop has to be technical mastery from the standpoint of, do they understand the rules of acceleration? Do they understand the rules of top speed? Do they understand the rules of change of direction before you start to worry about outputs? One, I think that allows them. I think that so we can improve performance by creating more force, producing force faster. We can do it by orienting force in a better, more efficient way, right? But I think that we have to worry about the way that an athlete actually orients force, and I think that will actually improve. That it does improve speed, and it does improve change of direction abilities if we can improve the way that they understand those different rules. Is kind of the first stop, and the reason why I advocate for that side a little bit more than the other way around is, I think that we aren't in it for the short term with most of the athletes that we work with. We're in it for the long haul. I mean, a lot of people that we work with, we see the longest ones that I've had now are 4 years. I've had them for 4 years now, and I think for the longevity of the athlete, from a health standpoint, I think that worrying about technical mastery first, and it doesn't mean you're not training the other ones, but that being your first stop and one of your key objectives allows them to hopefully be able to have a little bit more longevity or a healthier career along the ways, because they aren't working and constantly fighting themselves in terms of how they're moving. It doesn't mean you're not working on the others, but that's always kind of the first stop in terms of what I look for. Do they understand those different rules? And we can definitely hit on those rules as well. That would be awesome, and maybe that's what people want. But I think technical mastery is what I'm chasing with. Technical mastery is what I'm chasing with 99% of the athletes. There's probably 1% that I'm worrying about physical outputs at this point.
Yeah.
That's all with all the athletes I work with. There's a 1% that I think understand technical mastery. And again, I've had people for 3.5 years. But 1% of the athletes understand the technical components of those 3 aspects or those 3 training abilities enough to where I'm focused on an output.
Yeah.
Which is obviously not a lot.
Right. Yeah. So we could get, there's so many things on the rules on all 3 of those with acceleration, change direction, top speed. How about with acceleration? What are the main principles with that? and the rules?
Yeah, well, from kind of a little bit more of a complex standpoint, so we know when an athlete accelerates, every step gets longer, every step gets faster, ground contact times decrease, flight times increase, and our ground to body angle increases throughout an acceleration. Now, an easier way to say that is just projection. So does that mean, am I gaining ground out of a start? Are my hips moving in a positive direction? Then, well, hips and shoulder together, I guess. Rhythm, is their rhythm continuously growing through an acceleration until they reach max velocity? And then the last one is rise. So is their ground to body angle changing with every step that they take throughout the acceleration phase? And each of those kind of have different drills or different things that you're looking for along when you're training those aspects. But that, though, an athlete understanding those is what I look for first. And
So-
it's also how I set up my progressions of how I see training.
So most of the athletes that are listening to this, or the coaches that are listening to this, you know what I mean? A lot of them don't have the resources, or can't be in front of a coach, or they're in a rural area or something like that. Like, is there a way that you focus on this, when you're running? Because a kid doesn't understand rhythm, right?
Yeah.
Even us to teach that to a kid in front of him is extremely hard to do, right? But if there's something that they could do on their own, like, hey, I'm trying to get faster. And I think whether it's right or not, acceleration is the top thing in everybody's head. You know what I mean? They want that 10-yard to be faster. They want that 20, that 40 to be as fast as they possibly can, right? You know what I mean? To increase that. And they were like, hey, they're on their own and they have limited resources. You're not sending them anything. What could they focus on? Or a coach, if he had his team, what are we doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the challenge with that first. So the challenge with it is a lot of times the athletes that we have just aren't aware of it. They aren't aware of how something should feel and I guess the way that those different components kind of work together, which is the big challenge in terms of when you're trying to improve like technique. They just aren't aware of what they should be doing in the first place. And they aren't necessarily going to be aware of it just because we said it right there. They have to actually feel it and understand it and play with it and fail and succeed and go back and forth throughout that training process. If there's one thing that I will commonly see, the biggest thing that I struggle with and the biggest issue that I have with a lot of athletes is they don't understand what acceleration is. Acceleration isn't necessarily maximal effort. It's not, I'm going to grind through a rep as hard as I possibly can. And the reason I say it's the most common one is, again, we work with a lot of football guys, and football is so effort-based. It's about grinding, it's about working, and it's about showing effort to others around us. We all see the videos of people going through grinding reps where they're, I don't know, it's you hate to pick on it, but it's just like the grunting and they're showing and expressing effort. Well, that's not necessarily what acceleration is. That's not understanding rhythm. And so I think the big thing for people to understand is that the rhythm is always growing and it's changing throughout a repetition, and it's always building throughout a repetition. It's not a max effort right out of the start. Even though we're still exploding out of a start, my rhythm is still building from step to step. And if an athlete can understand that, at least with the ones that I've had, especially some of like the football guys, that sometimes will clean up a lot of other areas as well if you can just understand how to build with every step and how rhythm changes throughout a rep.
I love that. And for the athletes listening, our coaches, it's tough. That grind rep is more of that where you hear the at the beginning and it's all short and choppy, and it's like the effort is 100% there, but it's usually having a negative impact. I mean, usually they're, like you said, they're not orienting the forces in the right way. They're slowing down. You know what I mean? And then even if the first 3-4 steps are okay, that's going to kill their transitions and the rhythm moving forward for the rest of their run.
Yeah.
That's tricky. I mean, the rhythm thing is something we talk about all the time. Give me a strategy on how you've helped, a few athletes, get better at the rhythm. Because telling that to a kid is super hard to do.
No, it's really hard. I mean, it's one of those things where you can't really tell a kid to have rhythm. I mean, nobody understands what that means.
Especially when we don't have rhythm.
Yeah, for sure, especially not me. But I think there's some ways where you can kind of trick and create a rhythm within an athlete, and in a way of kind of like feeling some of that freedom as they go through a rep and what it should feel like. My favorite ones, and again, it's not so much the picking of drills, it's about how you set them up. I mean, people who are really good at language, like we talked about Dan Path, people who are really good at language and getting people to feel truly like, again, it's not just whether they can regurgitate it back to you, it's whether they like truly, it's a little cheesy, but they can like feel it in their bones, literally like it's hard to describe, but they can truly like understand and feel what they're trying to do. I think that for me, you can maybe get a little bit of that through language, but I have had better success through some drills just because I'm not as talented as that yet. So I really like again, it comes down to how you teach it, but like a skip for height and a skip for distance, I think that really gives an athlete a good feel of kind of like a freedom or a floating feel as they go through a rep. And especially with the skip for distance, usually that frequency, they start a little bit bigger and a little bit slower. And then even though their flight times are probably increasing as they build momentum, the rhythm is still kind of getting a little bit faster as they work their way forward. And so I really like those ones. But again, the big thing there is you're not teaching those as a max effort drill. And that's why you have to understand the drill that you're implementing. You're teaching that and you're using that drill to create rhythm. So if you're teaching maximal effort in a grinding skip for distance or a grinding skip for height, then you're just playing into the same issues that you have before in an acceleration rep. So with those, I'll commonly have athletes, hey, we're going to do this one at 75%. I don't care about how far you go. It really doesn't matter to me. I just want you to feel like you're floating through 20 yards or floating through 30 yards, where you kind of pull back and you release them from some of those like things where it's always about performance. It's always about grinding through reps. I don't really care about that. I want you to try and feel rhythm, and I want you to feel yourself float and almost glide your way down the turf. And I think that kind of sets up a little bit more of the rhythm that you're looking for in that acceleration phase and kind of getting them to actually feel that and maybe understand it a little bit more. So maybe in a rep or maybe in a training session, we might do our regular warm up, and then we'll do a couple just easy, smooth, floating skip for distance reps or skip for height reps. And then we pull things back. It's like, okay, well, I want you guys to feel the same rhythm that you just felt during those skips. And I want you to try and feel that and carry that over to our acceleration. I don't care about how fast you run, but I want you to feel that as we work through 10 or 15 or 20 yards, whatever it may be. Again, I think it's more so about how you set it up, because obviously it's not like, hey, go skip for distance and you're going to automatically get those results. But at the same time, I think that's kind of how I like to go about it and kind of set up my running reps a little bit more to get them to understand that.
I love it. And people can look on YouTube. We have Skip for Distance, Altus, I'm sure others. How many times a week? And again, I'm trying to give somebody something they could take with them. You know what I mean? And we're not in front of them, so we can't see it. You know what I mean? But how many times a week do you think that they should run? Say, let's go off season.
Yeah, off season. So
and distances. Yeah, I'm going to get crazy with you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you're trying to train. So if you're trying to look at specifically for acceleration, I think you have to touch on it at least probably twice a week.
Yep.
And again, you don't have to go overkill with it, but I think an intentional session where you have not necessarily a specific amount of reps, but you have a specific number of quality repetitions where they're game time repetitions. It's not like you're just running out to go run and it's half-assed and you don't care about results. And I think that they need to be set up the right way. So that's probably the biggest challenge in terms of, hey, do this. But I think probably 2 to probably 3 times a week probably covers most of your bases there.
So how do you structure your week? So say unlimited free model, you can do whatever you want. How do you structure the week?
Who's the athlete and what am I working with?
Let's say a field sport team, say off season. Let's go. Let's do one for football, one for soccer. Yeah, in the off season, and you have as many days a week as you possibly want with them.
Yeah, for sure. So usually the way that I set up my weeks, and this is from Stu, so all credit goes to him on this one. But my Monday session is always an introductory session, and that one, there's a couple reasons for that. One, nobody ever comes in good off the weekends. Usually, at least for the athletes that we have. Monday's always kind of a little bit of a slower day, so it just sets the rest of the week up really nice if you give them kind of an intro and a way to feel it. So usually on a Monday session, if you're specifically training for acceleration, which I guess we should have clarified as well, but if I'm specifically training for acceleration or speed development, usually that's a day where we might focus a little bit more on the drill side of things. So for us, we obviously work a lot in terms of the Altus-based warm-up, which is like dribble-based, some dribble bleeds, and then maybe some easy accelerations. Maybe you do work in some of the skip for distance reps where you're trying to get them to feel some of the technical aspects that you're going to cover in the next session or that next Tuesday. But the big thing there is you're using it as an opportunity to kind of gauge and judge where the athlete is. You're always collecting information. It's like, okay, well, did the athlete come in ready to train? What was their mood like? How are they feeling? Do they understand some of the different issues that we're looking for? And that might be a day where you're not cueing or instructing a ton. You're more of kind of just sitting back and watching and trying to maybe see or get an idea of what you're going to work on in that following session. Tuesday is usually kind of like a bigger session where you're going more towards an actual acceleration-based day or acceleration-based focus. And again, you can kind of lay that out or set it up however you want in terms of what output you're going to get. I mean, obviously we talked about it, but somebody who's very, very good and has really good experience and has been in the game for a long time might just be able to do it by the language he uses. Somebody like me, I sometimes like to use a little bit more of a drill-based feel and then some of the language to get them to understand what we're shooting for during that session. Wednesdays are usually always kind of an off or a reset. Maybe that's a day where you have them a little bit more on the table or doing some of like the Eldo work, which we like. And then it probably depends on how many days a week you're going to see them. But you can kind of, obviously, you can go back and do a really similar thing where your Thursday, again, is kind of a little bit more of a priming day. I've usually had a little bit more success backing off the volumes on that Thursday if you are going to do that and repeat the session. And then Friday, you can obviously touch on acceleration again, or you can break those up a little bit too. You could go like a Thursday, Saturday, but that's kind of like the nuances where it's hard to say, hey, this is the exact thing that I'm looking for, or this is the exact training cycle or model that I use from a week-to-week basis. I think it depends a little bit on who the athlete is and what they respond to a little bit more of or what they enjoy.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think that's huge. I think people can take that home with them, and I think that one thing that I've realized too, it's not always about the volume and the effort and the effort needs to be there, but the grind type of thing. Some people think like, especially the athletes that really want to work hard, you know what I mean? Where I got to be up at 5 or I got to work out twice and I got to go get it and I got to run till I pass out or throw up and stuff. And usually like that, it might build, a little bit of a conditioning base, but it's not building what they're actually going for. That's not making them faster. You know what I mean? And usually it's actually having the adverse effect. And it's really awesome. I feel like most of the teams that we've worked with and the coaches we've worked with have now seen the injury rates go down that we've had and the performance go up to where we've had a lot of that buy-in now too, where it's not a lot of our coaches are running them into the ground. And I think social media in general has kind of shown that so far to where people, the old school way is maybe not the best way to go about it. But I think that's a huge takeaway for me. We still have kids to where it's like, no, I can do more, or I want to go get it, or let's go do a mile on the assault bike, or let's go, you know what I mean? Where it's tough, but they're absolute, diehard guys, but that's not always going to give you the most bang for your buck.
Yeah, it's funny. I got asked a couple weeks ago, what are 3 things you go back and change in your baseball career? And we don't have to touch on a few of them, but the biggest one that I would go back and change is that
not taking 1,000 hacks a day.
I misunderstood what hard work is. I truly did. I misunderstood what work actually is, and it's easy to take 1,000 swings every day because one, it's a safety net for us, right? There's nothing else we could have done, and so we feel comfort. I did that, and so there's a safety net in that, and it's also cool to say that you did it. So it's born out of insecurity, but I think that work and hard work is about intention, and it's about chasing technical mastery, and it's about quality repetitions or training sessions, whatever it may be. That doesn't mean we're going to be 100% perfect every day. It definitely doesn't mean that. But at the same time, I think that whether it's cultural or whatever it may be, there has to be a shift in terms of what hard work is. Just because you showed up, it doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
It doesn't matter to me. I really could care less whether or not you showed up to the Rocky lift at 5:50 this morning. I really don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Everyone shows up at 5:50. You had to be there. So what is the work that you're doing? That's how I judge whether or not an athlete is working hard. What's the work you're doing? What's the quality of work that you're doing? And were you intentional about the working sets that you completed in that session? And that's how I judge kids in terms of their work ethic or their goals and objectives, and whether or not those align with the work that they're doing.
Right? Is it real?
Yeah.
No, intent is huge. Maybe the most important thing. Like you said, over showing up every time that you're working, making sure it has a purpose.
Yeah.
I think that's been a fun one to see and recognize the patterns. I feel like we could tell probably in a day, in that first hour. We might not figure out what we need to do with them, but we can figure out, okay, this guy's got a shot. Some of the athletes like we've been talking about before, like, okay, maybe he might not be the best quarterback, but that guy's going to work harder than every single person in that weight room or on the field. He's going to be the smartest guy on the field. You're going to find a spot to play. That guy's going to figure it out. You know what I mean? Constantly texting us, figuring out what they can do more, who they can listen to, what they can break down. I mean, those are the type of people that have the most success.
Yeah. Well, and I think the hard part too is like even us now. I mean, that's the same battle that I would say we have, right? It's so easy to want to chase and constantly like do more, but it's interesting because like sometimes I'll just sit back and I'll be like, I'll look at some of the things that I've read and I'll look at some of the things that I've tried to do and implement and whatnot, and did I actually get anything out of it, or did I just do it because I said I so it's cool that I said I did,
right?
Or did I actually like spend the time trying to understand and look at it from like a quality perspective? It's like, did that contribute to my practice, and did that contribute to what I'm trying to do with the athletes that I have? And I would much rather at this point, and again, I fall back into the trap all the time, just like I think everyone does, but did I do a little bit less, but I did it at an unbelievably high level, like the standard that I believe in, to where it's like, this is going to influence what I do. It's going to change the way my athletes, not change the way my athletes train, but it's going to influence the way that my athletes train, as opposed to, did I just do a bunch of stuff that, yeah, cool, said I did it, and it didn't contribute to what my objectives are. And that's also, I think, it's a weird intro, or lead in, but the same way I think that we probably see the training process too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love it. So for our athletes, I mean, really sprint 2 to 3 times a week, have intent, and make them, whatever your goals are, make sure that your work aligns with your goals. Those 3 things, I think you're going to be already 10 steps ahead of everybody else. And I think that's in anything too, not just in sports.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I love it. And it's so cool to see those athletes when they want to do it. Even the guy we know that's never going to play collegiate sport. But when they come in and they're like, hey, man, they want to get better and they want to make the varsity squad, or they want to do this, and you can see they're working for that.
Yeah.
It's literally the coolest thing ever. That's what makes it all worth it. Same thing with our coaches. Like, I don't need a coach that has a master's in strength and conditioning. I need a coach that loves kids and is like, I want to be the best possible coach I can possibly be.
100%.
Day one.
100%.
Day one, your first goal. And I've talked about it only a few times, but more recently. But you told me you wanted to be the best strength coach in the world, and you said it straight-faced, and you have, with your actions, 100% proved that every day, which is awesome. And I think that's the greatest gift that I get and learn from my kids. It's where sometimes it's easy for me to fall off and realize, like, man, this kid's this bought in. Like, I said I was going to do this, or I did that, but what did I take away from it? I half-assed that, you know? That's the coolest thing about what we do.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to learn if we just pay attention.
Yeah.
So much to learn if we just pay attention.
Write that one down, Jerry. So let's transition. So the ACL, we talked about a lot last time. You didn't even love the way that we talked about it. What about with, what we've been doing from where you were at then and now? What struggles have you had, dealing with some of our ACL athletes? What struggles have you had with the process that we get, from the surgeon, from the therapists, from the training staffs, and then, what progress have you had? What's changed? Where are you at with some of your ACL kids?
Yeah, I guess the biggest challenges and the biggest challenges that I probably face with the ACL athletes that we work with is a misunderstanding of what, again, actually, I guess I should maybe take a step back. ACL training is just training. 100%, it's just training. It's laid out maybe a different fashion, and maybe you're chasing a few different objectives, but in the same way, I see it through the same lens, and I think you see it through the same lens as just a training process. It's, do athletes have a mastery in whatever training item or training or movement or set and rep scheme? Do they have a mastery of the things that we prescribe or what we deem as important? And I think there's a misunderstanding in terms of how athletes progress through those stages. I think so often we talked about it the last time we spoke in here, is just athletes see at 3 months I'm going to run, at 5 months I'm going to change direction, at 9 months I'm fully cleared. And that's the progression. They just see it as a straight timeline. It's, hey, I do my time and I show up, and over time, hopefully, I'm going to progress and get better, and I'm going to eventually get cleared. But that's not the case by any means. You have to show a certain level of mastery, each one of the stages and each one of the steps and each one of the movements and each one of the set and rep schemes, to actually be able to progress and move through those different stages of the rehab. And I don't think that oftentimes, whether it's a lack or a failure on my end to educate athletes in terms of what we actually are looking for, or just from a systematic standpoint, I think that's the biggest misunderstanding that I face and that I currently face and that I currently see, is just, we have athletes that struggle to do basic movements or basic qualities, and they're fully cleared to go, and it's time to go, and they don't see an issue with that. And again, I think it comes down to whether or not I could have educated them better in terms of what I'm looking for along that process to inform that process. And that's the biggest struggle that I have. That's the biggest struggle that I think all of us see that work with ACL kids at Off the Field. And I don't think it's just I don't think that's just an off the field issue.
Yeah.
I think that's a much bigger issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's communication, and it's not from anybody wants any, or hey, my program is better than yours, but it's everybody's saying something different.
Yeah.
And the old school model is like, hey, 3 months you jog, 6 months you cut, 9 months you're playing. You know what I mean? And that's just, and when that communication is happening, sometimes that does work. Sometimes they might be there and that actually might work, which then you hear of somebody who's done that, so then the athlete thinks I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then how you get there, you know what I mean? Somebody says one thing, somebody says another, and then we're like, well, you can't move like that. Like, you can see this doesn't work. They're like, oh, well, I can get it because I'm cheating with something else. And they're almost okay that they're cheating, not really realizing, one, it's going to decrease performance, two, you're going to get hurt again.
Yeah.
Like, almost guaranteed, whether it's that knee or the other knee.
Yeah.
That's keeps me up at night. That just frustrates the heck out of me. And it's all from the right intent, though. Everybody wants the best for them. The surgeon, the therapist, us, the training staff, the coach, the parents, the kid. But getting us parallel and getting that symmetry has been extremely difficult.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's even hard for us. It's really hard for us because it's hard to remove yourself from the lens of this athlete should be able to do this.
Yeah.
They're at this point, they should be able to do this. I had an athlete yesterday come in, and he's at the same stage, and he's able to do this. So we look at it through the same lens, but at the same time, we can't look at it through a lens of what the athlete should be able to do. We have to look at it through the lens of what the athlete's actually capable of.
Can they do it?
What are their competencies, and do they allow for similar activities or training items? And that's really hard. It's hard for me to do, and it's hard for all of us to do, just even if we're aware of it, even if we're aware of those struggles. I mean, I've told you the story a lot about working with a certain athlete, and I had somebody who was awesome, and he was consulting with us on the project, and I had the opportunity to write part of the training cycle or the training scheme. And I put together, like, it took way too long. I mean, I was trying to put together the perfect program for the athlete that I was working with, and the guy who was consulting on the project, he looked at that program for about 5 seconds and was just like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing, man? Like, this doesn't align with what he's capable of. We know there's issue A, B, C, or D, and those have been common. We're aware of them. We know they're there, but at the same time, it's just so hard to remove yourself from that context and that training environment, take a step back, and it's like,
because you want to go to the next step.
You always want to go to the next stage, right? And the athlete wants to go to the next stage, and everyone wants to move to the next stage, but it's you have to be able to remove yourself and take a step back and say, where is the athlete at and what needs to be addressed right now?
Yep.
Right now.
So if you could build a perfect framework with the whole medical triage, everything, surgeon, us, PTs, we're all in one house. Who cares what the name is? Off the field, Jake Taylor, Taylor Bateman, whatever it is. What would that look like for you? And let's go on the high school side of things. We have somebody tears the ACL. How do we have a system or a framework or a model, you know what I mean, that where we can take care of it? I mean, what would that look like for you?
Yeah, so the first stop has to be the context that you're working in and the environment that you're putting the athlete into. So number one, the surgeon has to be on board with what we're trying to create. If the surgeon clears him at 9 months and you don't believe the athlete has mastery, that's obviously a problem. I mean, that's a big issue. So the surgeon has to be on board with the project that we're trying to kind of create and develop, and they have to be on board with the fact that we're not going off of a timeline, which is really hard, but we're not going off a timeline. We're going to go off of where the athlete is at and what their competencies are, and if their competencies show that they're actually ready to progress and transition to a return to sport. I think second stop means that the PT also has to be online, because the PT, rightfully so, it's a fine line and it's a really big gray area, but the PT should be in charge realistically, or in an optimal or a good environment. They should be in charge in the first probably 1 to 3 months. They should be running the show and informing the show in terms of, hey, this is where we're going, this is the direction we're moving in, they've shown this, and this. This is how we can kind of adapt training, whether it's us or the PT carrying out the training, because obviously we battle the fight of insurance. They should be the ones probably guiding that process. And then obviously the strength and conditioning coach or my end has to be on board with what they want to do as well. And there's kind of a constant interplay in terms of how that's working and how that communication is. I think once you have the context and the environment set, then you have to start to outline and establish what KPIs you're looking for. And I don't think there's any set value that we're looking for. I mean, my preference is always biodex and force plates, but a lot of people have done a lot of really good rehabs in the past without a biodex and without force plates. And so while obviously I would really like to have those because I think they give hints and clues to what and how an athlete is moving throughout those progressions and what their functional state actually is, and they're really sensitive, and hopefully it's a double check to what our eyes see. I think that those have to be in play at least somewhere, and at least a few of those objective measures have to be in play to help inform the rehab process, because I think those bring together those three components that we talked about, the surgeon, the PT, and the strength coach. I think they bring them together and allow them to have a little bit better communication.
So everybody's on the same page.
Everyone's on the same page. And I think once you have those KPIs established and you work backwards, it's like, okay, well, what are my testing time points? When am I looking to work through and actually perform those tests throughout the rehab process? Obviously, you aren't going to be able to do a counter movement jump on a force plate until a little bit later in the rehab process. So you do have something in the earlier stages of that rehab that can give an idea or an indication of what the athlete's functional state is. And I think that's also another probably challenge or frustration is I think the testing frequency isn't performed. The testing isn't done with a frequency that's great enough for us to understand how the athlete is progressing. It's done as a checkpoint.
Instead of having an influence on the programming in the
exactly,
training,
100%.
It's not having that. Yeah.
Instead of influencing the training and giving us ideas and things to talk about amongst our performance staff and giving us a direction of training, hey, maybe we need to implement a little bit more of this. And, hey, we're collecting clues and trying to find out different ideas as to where that athlete actually is. It's done as, hey, you clear this, good.
Next.
Yeah, next guy up. And I think that whatever metric you choose, it has to be done with a high enough frequency to try and understand the training process and understand how the athlete is adapting and what's their reaction to the training programs that we're implementing in with them. So it's not just outlining the KPIs. It's also outlining, okay, well, when am I going to go through and sequentially move through these different tests to give me an idea or hopefully help that athlete progress through the training and help us to create a more effective training cycle or program as well. And then the actual implementation of the program is built around those different aspects, and that's obviously kind of the dream or the goal of the environment that you're going to be in and what we're creating. So,
I mean, it is a dream. I think. I mean, we're going to build it.
Yeah,
we're going to bring it. We're going to make it happen here. I mean, I think the relationships and the conversations we've had with the therapists and the not even just in the state, but therapists we have in the state, in our building, outside of our building, the surgeons. I mean, we're going to make that happen, and we're going to make this process better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's never going to be perfect, but we're going to be way better at it.
Yeah. Well,
it's going to be awesome. I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but I mean that's a constant. That's kind of probably one of my biggest focuses right now with Offthefield is, I mean, whether it's OTF medical, whatever it is, but we're going to go change this return to play process with all therapy, not just ACLs.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes back to the buy-in that we talked about earlier. It comes down to the passion, and because what we just laid out is 100% not easier. That was one big misinterpretation when I had the opportunity to work with force plates with an athlete. I thought it was going to be easier. I thought it was going to guide things. I thought it was going to help me. Well, not help is the wrong way to say it, but I thought it was going to clarify things. But all it was harder. It was 100% a harder process. One, it exposed and it audited me constantly. Was my training program up to standard to actually help the athlete, and was it actually doing what I said it was going to do?
Right.
When we have our meetings and we talk about different training plans and ideas and concepts, is my training doing what I said it was going to do? And it's a constant audit, right? Because the athlete is looking at it, and that's that trust and that relationship back and forth, and it brings about more problems than the other way. But at the end of the day, I think it's the right way to do it, and I think it's the only way to do it. And for us to be on board with that, or for people to be on board with that, there has to be a lot of passion going along those three kind of spectrums or realms in terms of supporting the athlete. That can't be a solo mission in one of those groupings. Everyone's got to be on board with that for it to actually work.
It's exciting. It's stressful in a good way, and seeing the athletes that we work with and knowing that there's ways that I feel like we could still be, giving them, I don't want to say better service because I think we're giving them everything we got, but I think that, like you said, I think the communication could be better and where everybody's on the same timeline, and I think, there's the mental side of things is huge. Even the fact with how much it can affect tissue health, which we've seen with a few of our pro guys and younger athletes. You know what I mean? To where I think if everybody was on the line and we had the same standards, same expectations, same goals that we could set with that athlete, and the athlete sees those, the parent sees those, I think the whole process will get better. Maybe it does speed it up. You know what I mean? Or even if it doesn't, the confidence is going to go through the roof. You know what I mean? And that's going to be that's what we're building.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So, what's next, brother? Where are we going in 2 weeks?
Yeah, so I recently accepted a position with the Los Angeles Dodgers. So I'll be the strength coach for their high A affiliate team that's based out of Midland, Michigan. So the next couple weeks, I guess the middle part of December, I'll be down in Arizona for a couple weeks, and then I'll be back in Arizona for spring training in the spring, and then I'll be in Michigan until probably about middle August, and I'll be working with their high A affiliate team during that period. And yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be awesome. I'm excited.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, thank you.
So awesome.
Thank
you're
you.
going to be the head guy of a single high A team,
Mhm.
running it yourself. I mean,
Mhm.
I think that it's only a matter of time. I mean, when you move up, and even
Mhm.
and I know that's not even your biggest focus right now. I
Mhm.
feel like these athletes and the people you're going to work with, and the coaches and the people that are going to see you work, it's going to be the impact you're going to be able to have with one of the best organizations in the world.
Mhm.
Really,
Yeah.
I mean, we have some minor leaguers that come by and say, "Man, they're stealing what the Dodgers are doing because they're
Mhm.
the best at what they do."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you get to be
Yeah.
a part of that, and I think in a really short amount of time, you're going to have a huge influence on them. So,
Yeah.
congrats, brother.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
miss you, and I love you, but that's a cool next step for you, and I'm really not letting you go either. I'm gonna be calling you every single day anyway, so it's all good with me. Appreciate it, man.
No, of course. Yeah.
Hell yeah, well, go kill it.
Yeah, thank you.